Today, we're excited to host Cheryl Johnson as we learn more about the campaigns led by People for Community Recovery, or PCR, such as the work they've done in support of the local Hazel Johnson Cumulative Impacts Ordinance. Before I introduce Cheryl, I want to thank our partners and co-sponsors and note that after her presentation, a couple of student leaders, Jasa and Esmeralda, will be in short conversation with our guest. We also welcome you to jot down any questions or comments you may have along the way. Cheryl will present for about 30 minutes. And now I'm lucky to be able to introduce her. Cheryl has served as the Executive Director of People for Community Recovery since 2001. And she is the daughter of the late Hazel M. Johnson, known as the Mother of Environmental Justice, who founded PCR in 1979. Cheryl learned the fundamentals of community organizing from her mother and carries on the work of PCR's mission to enhance the quality of life of residents living in communities affected by pollution. With her support, PCR has prevented hundreds of units in Algilt Gardens from being torn down, pressured the CHA to create a redevelopment plan that includes community input, has secured safe environmental cleanup on the south side, and stopped another landfill from being placed in our communities, and stopped discriminatory recruiting practices from the Ford Motor Company on the far south side. And that's just some of the work that she's committed to doing and has done along the way. I could go on, but I will pause there. Please join me in welcoming Cheryl Johnson. Cheryl, bienvenida. Oh, sorry, Cheryl, you're muted.
And I just said 1,001 words. I'm just joking, y'all. But thanks everybody for inviting me to this conversation today. This climate justice is real and it's serious, and we need to always be prepared to protect it, regardless of what the current conditions we are experiencing today. So thank you for inviting me. So one of the things that you want me to go into discussion on how we're doing this is a Q&A or
Yeah, you have like 20 till 2:45, 2:40, 25
Mhm.
minutes to go through your slides or talk to us as much however you'd like, and then we'll let the students jump in.
Well, one of my discussion is today is that we have a city ordinance that's pending in zoning to create the Hazel M. Johnson Cumulative Impact Ordinance. And basically, this ordinance really came out from the settlement that the city made with the General Iron, relocating from from the north side to the southeast side of Chicago, which demonstrated that there was definitely environmental racism played a role in the relocation of this facility. So under the Biden administration, they cited the city of Chicago, in which the city of Chicago decided they had a consent decree to make changes in the structural of the city of Chicago, the way they address um, um, issues around EJ issue, for an example, because a lot of things really came out from the impact from the settlement from the General Iron. But one of the things that we are pushing now is to push this ordinance, and you could go to the next page. Um, well, these are principal norms. I'm sure everybody heard about the Hemison's principles and stuff like that. But when you think about it, it's always been inclusive. We're always going to do things from the bottom up, and we're going to respect everybody else's decisions. But leadership should come from the community that has been negatively impacted. And I was happy to know that my mother was one of the people who helped craft these principles along with the environmental just 17 just the environmental just the principle of environmental justice, the 17 principles of environmental justice. Excuse me, y'all. So you could go to the next slide. As I've spoken, many of you know that Hazel Johnson is considered the mother of environmental justice. And when I just mentioned about the 17 principles of environmental justice was presented to Clinton, and this was the signing February 11, 1994, remember that he signed the Executive Order 12898 that gave, because one of the things I do want to talk about that people really didn't realize that when the United States Environment Protection Agency was erected in 1969, it was only mandated to work with academic institution and to regulate industry, but it had no mandate to work to community that live in communities that are being impacted by these industries until President Clinton signed the Executive Order 12898, which opened up opportunity. We couldn't get, community couldn't get technical resource, community couldn't get grants, community couldn't get any support because they had no mandate to work with community. But because of this executive order created by the Clinton administration, it opened up those opportunities. But in addition to that, it opened up the Office of Environmental Justice. It also connected Title 10 civil rights issues to environmental justice. It also addressed the National Environmental Protection Act. So it gave a lot of opportunity, and it was able to trickle down resources that community groups could not be able to get from the federal government for training or to even technical assistance or economic development in a community or brownfield redevelopment cleanup. You can go to the next page. So what are the cumulative impact we are talking about is the combination of environmental health and social stressors that people experience in our daily life every day. When I'm I lived in this community in Allgale Gardens. It's a public housing development on the far south side of Chicago. This past March 18, I'm not telling y'all my age, but I've been out here 64 years. That's the only community that I ever lived in all my life. So it was common for me I people knew how to distinguish what my community on from the expressway just by the air quality alone. You don't know, they said, oh, we close to Allgame because that's how much. I think we had over like 350,000 pounds of pollutants that was emitted into the air every day. Majority, 80% of the industry in that area was in violation of the air permits that allowed them to to emit their pollutants in the air, and they was all out of violation. So, but we grew up thinking that was common for our area, but which it wasn't common. It made many people in my community sick because that's one of the reasons why my mother founded the organization because it was told that our all that the high incidence of cancer in the city of Chicago was based on zip code, and we was number one, 60627. So, and not only that, it's the soil contamination because we are built on a liquid dump site. So here in Chicago and New York, EJ Group used data from EPA EJ screen to create maps that show cumulative impacts. These tools has helped advocate for better policy and providing clear and driven data visuals that highlight the combined effects of pollutants and development in communities of colors. So we was able to demonstrate that we have a map that we showed and that we called our community Toxic Donut. We sit in the middle of the donut, and outside the perimeter of the donut is all these polluting entities. We use, and just as I was saying, we had like 350,000 pounds of pollutants in our air. Today, I think it's under 100 pounds of pollutants in our community today, but it's still, but that's still a problem. It shouldn't be that much in our air. You could go to the next page. This what cumulative impact look like. If you look at most of the dark, and it's almost associated with the red line in the city of Chicago, where you see most of the vulnerable community and the land use practices here in the city of Chicago, Detroit. We're right down here at the bottom of this map. It's the darkest at the bottom to your left. Yeah, it's all up in what you close right here. But most of those lines signify these are, I think they said I think I can remember it was landfills. Because we have documented that we have 50 abandoned landfills in our community. You could go to the next page. Blacks and Latinx Chicagoans are overrepresented in the industrial zone land. Yes, and it's only 4 or 5 of these zones area, but they are predominantly in our black and brown communities. So if you could look from this ledger that what this is what it looked like for our communities. 29% of the land in the Latin community neighborhood, 20% of the land in the black community are zoned for manufacturing. It's not equitable in the distribution of these type of facilities in the city of Chicago, even in the state of Illinois. You can go to the next one. Just like I said, our community spends the worst air quality due to high pollution exposure. And this is another, if you look at the legend here, the darker it is, the higher the concentration of pollution exposures. And as you can see, these are our community, the south and the west side of the city of Chicago. Next one. The background on policy development. If you could look that because of the lawsuit that was filed, well, it wasn't a lawsuit. Let me be technically correct. It was a complaint filed with Housing and Urban Development against the city of Chicago for racial discrimination and racism when the practicing of the relocation of the General Iron. So the city of Chicago externals, I can't even read this. It's so little. Could you raise it up a little bit for me? Can you enlarge it for me? Yeah. Well, if you can really look at this, you can see the timeline of activities that we have really implemented and for as part of policy development in the city of Chicago to fight for, changes in the in the permitting process of the city of Chicago when it comes to getting permits to these industries. You could go to the next one. So the Community Impact Assessment Summary. Chicago Community Impact Assessments is co-led by community groups and the city to help identify neighborhoods that experience the greatest cumulative burdens of informed decision making around policies. It's cutting off. Something is cutting off in this and to make informed decisions around policy and the potential harms of these investments that the Chicago should make. The assessment includes community input summary, Chicago Environmental Justice Index and map, the City of Chicago Environmental Justice Action Plan, and the community impact policy recommendations. You go to the next one. The Hazel Johnson Community Impact Ordinance is we're driving for a healthy and a safety community. I'm glad to say that we are honored to be in co-partnership with your university again, and in the installation of 270 sensors around the city of Chicago, because UIC is in partnership with the city of Chicago to for the installation of these sensors, and also they also are making a dashboard to make it user friendly so other people can see what the air quality in their particular area, and each community group has the opportunity uh, to select where these monitors should be in their respective communities. So this is one example of what came out as a result of the impact and some of the settlement with the HUD in regards to that violation. But right now, the federal government is not. They took their hands away in the monitoring to make sure that the city complete all the recommendations that HUD has given to the city in order to remove the complaint. So when you look at one of the most important thing is that it required additional review for permit to certain type of new and expanded extensive industry facility to ensure that they are safe for the health of the community and the environment. We are requiring intensive industrial facility to conduct community impact study to assess potential environmental and health impact. These impact studies will be reviewed by a new board and is called the Environmental Justice Advisory Board and post public on the city website. This is where we are currently now is working on the composition of the Environmental Justice Advisory Board because it changes, but the number hasn't changed. I think it's supposed to be 11-member board, if I'm correct. You go to the next one. The advisory board co-governs is going to be a commission from CDPH, commission from the CD Department of Transportation, and then they're going to have the Chief Sustainable Office, the chair of the Committee on the Environment and Protection and Agency Committee within the City of Chicago. Then the non-governmental members are going to be appointed by the mayor. 10 members from the environmental justice community area, 3 members from various nonprofit organizations, one public health expert, one environmental climate expert, and 1 member from the business community. This is not the updated version. This is when it was first established. I can't remember, but I remember that some of the numbers got reduced, or one of the public health experts became as an ex-official member. But this is not the correct. It made some changes because it's going to be at least 3 business people, 3 members from the business community. So I don't have that. If you want that information, I can get that back to you at a later date. Go to the next one. What are the benefits to this EJ advisory board? It's a long-term representation. It includes individuals who live and represent environmental justice community area. It provides suggestions and guidance to the city plan on policy, including the environmental justice action plan. Advise the city of heavy industrial zoning decision. Work collaboratively with the city department to provide feedback and recommendations on environmental justice initiatives. You could go to the next one. So if you can look at this chart, it demonstrates what is the community impact zoning process. First, it starts at the city in the intake process. And then once it goes there and complete all those things that are required from the city standpoint. Then they go to a public participation review, and where they have to have public meetings and everything, and take in comments from the community. And once it reaches that stage, and then it goes to the zoning board. Then it have to go, and for the final, it got to go through these special use plan development and all these other committees within the city of Chicago before you get the final permit for its operations. Next one. What are some of the benefits proposed in the zoning changes? More thorough public review process for developing and seeking permits because in the past the community was not notified or didn't have the opportunity to be engaged in these type of developments that's happening in their neighborhood. Or they didn't require these type of development to meet with the community. So this zoning change is very important for the protection of our community. So we need more complete evaluation of the potential health and environment impact proposed by industrial sites. That never really happened in the city of Chicago unless there was an accident or an explosion or something like that. But we're trying to be prevented in this process. We don't want to. We want you to evaluate that up front the value to see what are the potential harms that could come to our community before you make that determination. And then one of the other things is the greater protection for the community disproportionately burden back. And if we're already overburdened, why would we want to have overburdened with another hazard for our community? So these are some of the zoning changes, but what's stopping the whole ordinance to move out of zoning and get to the floor of the city is the fact that they don't have a zoning chairman right now. So the acting zoning chairman has this the politics side. I really don't know the inside out, but there's a speculation, allegedly, as they say, is that he's not holding his meeting is because he want that position, but they are pushing someone else within the city council to be the zoning. So that's allegedly being said in the community in regards to the main stonewalling for holding a zoning committee meeting so we can get it passed through there and move to the city council. Next page. So if you could look at it, if you look at some of the components of the community impact ordinance, it's stronger public participation and representation. It analyzed community impact, industrial zones reform, improved transparency, and more just outcome in industrial zoning decisions. What are our next step? As I said, we can't even meet in city council zoning committee until they nominate a chairperson. But also we must build alignment with external partners. We must brief aldermen and other key stakeholders group about this ordinance. We need to re-engage the business community because we're not trying to hurt business. We're just trying to improve the quality of life of our community where they operate and for the worker safety also. So it's all inclusive. And I don't understand why people will put profit over health. What good is that if you're making people sick just to make a profit? But we have to be adamant when we're talking about our community because we live there 24/7, and the biggest burden, the most affected population is us children and our seniors, and who give people the right to infringe on anybody quality of life just to say to make money. I just have a problem with that, y'all. It's inconceivable. I will not try to operate a business that's going to create harm to nobody. And then we don't have rules for a large industry facility acquiring permits. It's unfortunate to say that the city, the state, and the county never denied a permit, and they continue to give permits when these industry are in violations. So and that has to change. So. These are some of the things that we are fighting for within the community impact ordinance. Okay, I think this is almost the last. Yeah, this is. So I don't have the survey, but if you wanted to cue into it, if that QR code really worked, you're welcome to try it and that will give us feedback as to what you think about the cumulative impact ordinance. And thank
Great.
you.
Great, thank you. Oh, we have a little live audience over here too. Great, thank you so much for that, Cheryl. It was a great presentation. Let's give a virtual round of applause for Cheryl Johnson. We love always bringing you back in to talk about the amazing work that PCR is doing, especially being one of the oldest environmental justice organizations in Chicago, right? Like you've been doing this work literally for decades.
But
And
well, we are considered well, my mom been doing environmental justice issues. Her first active campaign was when we had an explosion out here from one of the company was operating in this area. I think it was just on the top of my tongue. Anyway, I can't think of, but it was in 1974.
Yeah.
It's when she really started paying attention to the air quality because we had to be evacuated in that area.
Wow.
And we was the last to be notified to evacuate from the neighborhood. Oh, the name of the company was Buck Terminal,
Mm.
and they had an explosion in that area. So she founded the organization in 1979. So we are the first environmental justice organization in the city of Chicago and the Midwest.
Yeah.
So also we are considered the birthplace. That's what I was going to say because we've been doing it for almost 47 years this year.
Yeah. Yeah, your 50th is kind of coming up too.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's why when I was saying earlier that the United States Environment Protection Agency didn't work with community because they didn't have to, you
mhm.
know. So we was pressuring the US EPA Region 5, you know, and there was a group, it was a coalition of us. And this was before the Southeast Environmental Task Force became to light because as a result of that, that's when we formed the Southeast Environmental Task Force. Is because we was fighting with US EPA in regards to um the problem we was having in our communities.
Yeah.
And we was calling it environmental racism. They need to discuss this. So we was able, I think his name was William Sanders. He was the regional administrator, and we was able to present the Southeast Chicago Urban Environmental Initiative to the Region 5, which had a host of many things, industries that we wanted them to look at. And we want to look at we want to improve the health quality in the community. I think we said something about gardening. I think we talked about air monitoring. I think this document was formed in 1992, and it was a coalition of, it was a group called Citizens for a Better Environment.
Mhm.
It was the Chicago Legal Clinic. It was representative from the southeast side as a whole family. They into politics. I can't think of their name. It was a host of groups. It was with CNT, Center for Neighborhood Technology. It was a coalition of groups that came together to fight, and it was one of the most important thing. It was the landfill operation. It it helped shape the moratorium that we still have on the books today
Mhm.
in the city of Chicago around no moratorium for any landfills to be built in the city of Chicago. So those were some of the things that as I show as an example,
Mhm.
that we've been involved with when there wasn't an awareness around environmental justice. And my mother experienced so much harassment and intimidation, and but it didn't stop her because she believed in what she was fighting for was the right cause. And even though the term wasn't even coined, environmental justice and being labeled a troublemaker, and she didn't know what she was talking about, and garbage need to go somewhere else. Why not your neighborhood?
Yeah.
So it was just that, when you talk to your elected official, so it's been very hard. It's been
Yeah.
very hard to get to the point where we are today. And she would be so honored to see that this movement is growing. It has grew, but it's growing. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not going to go away because
No, it's strong. It stays
everybody
strong.
is everybody is making that connection because it's our life, it's our home, it's our work. It's where we work, live, and play. And who's going to protect our kids?
Mm.
We got to protect them from the harms that we are experiencing. And I was just telling someone last week when I was young in age, I didn't have friends that had asthma. And cancer was such a secret that you really didn't know if someone was suffering from that disease or anything. But particularly with asthma, none of my friends that I grew up with had asthma until we seen, like when I got in my 20s, that's when I started learning a lot about people are having breathing problems, and there was a distinct connection to our air quality. If your air quality is poor, common sense says it could have a negative impact on your breathing. And everybody bodies is not the same. And if we don't do nothing else, we got to protect our kids. We got to protect the young because they didn't ask to come in this world to be harmed from external forces. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. No, 100% everything that you said, right? Like the environmental justice movement, even if it was already being talked about, especially by like your mother and other Black communities, and it's still growing and it's still really strong. And so now we're gonna give our audience some time to ask questions, and we're gonna start off with actually two of our student educators who are here at the Latino Cultural Center, and they're gonna start off with asking two questions to you, and then from there we'll be able to open it up to the audience. So I already see some audience questions in our chat and also the Q&A, and we're going to try to get to all of them. But if anyone else has any other questions that they would, or questions or comments that they would like to add to the chat, feel free to do so while we get started with two of our student questions. So I'm going to pass it over to Jocelyn first, to ask her question to you, Cheryl.
sure.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. That was super informing. My question is, so you talked about how marginalized communities are impacted the most by environmental injustice, especially Black and Brown communities. So I guess my question would be, how can we keep pressuring and moving elected officials to take our communities seriously and advocate for policy that ultimately leads to better environmental and economic conditions?
Well, if there's a issue of concern for you and you felt that is not right, that's what you fight for. But the most important thing is try to educate the community what you are fighting for. Because it's not just limiting it to what you experience, because whatever you experience, we all experience it, in some indirect way. And today, now if you asked me this 40 years ago, I was like, it'd be a totally different conversation as to how we would have that discussion. But today, everybody is getting to understand what environmental justice is and what environment pollution is all about. But we definitely have to always organize around our local government because they are the decision makers at the end of the day. And if we don't keep them on their toes about protecting our community, will they protect our communities? Because it's evidence today because our lack of engagement with our local politicians, their decisions has been brought down to our communities. And now we in a situation that we have to fight multiple front just to achieve one goal. You know what I mean? So if you know, if you feel that it's not right, I'm not an expert at what I do. I just brought passion to what I do because I care about how things impact us as people in this community, and I see the inequitable, especially if you see the inequitable of the decision that one community is being protected over than another community. That's a problem, and we can change that. I mean, if today the current affair of today don't teach you then to be more engaged and informed because we do have that right as citizens is to because if we don't, things only gonna get worse. We got to fight for things to be better and right. It's just common sense what is right and what is wrong. And there's a lot of wrong going on right now in current conditions. So I just said be passionate about if it's and do your homework. Do your research about whatever that issue that you wanted to address, because they expect for you not to be prepared because they are not prepared. The better prepared we are, the better we get response from our elected officials.
Thank you for that, Cheryl. So now I'm going to pass it over to our other student, Esme, who's going to ask our next question.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very informative. So my question is, how can public healthcare systems better respond to climate-related illness in vulnerable groups?
But it needs to be a partnership between the health industries and the community. For lack of better word, for lack of terminology, they need to create community health advocates. We're the community people, even though we got emergency first responders, but nobody talk about the community first responders because we know our neighbors, we know our community, and and one of the things is that it has to be a better health assessment criteria. For an example, I use this as an example. With conjunctivitis, that's the pink eye, right? And there's only two ways you can be exposed to it is through a virus or irritant. But if it happened on the epidemic side of things, what do you think that is? Is that a virus or an irritant? But when you go to the medical profession, they're just going to treat it as conjunctivitis and give you medicine for it. But you don't know a virus in order for conjunctivitis at least. In order for me to expose you to it, you have to get some kind of exposure from the secretion from my eyes to you. But if it's a chemical irritant in the air, we can't control that, right? But when we go to the doctor, are they testing for a virus or an irritant? They just treating it. They just treating it as conjunctivitis. And a lot of times we think that, oh, it's an epidemic, because it tends to flare up a whole lot during the summertime. We don't really know if it's an irritant or a virus that we're being exposed to. It's just been treated as conjunctivitis, the pink eye, for an example. So I just say that is that when you have program, I think it needs to be programmed, aside from, we somehow we need to change the whole medical concept because in America it's only to treat an illness. It's not about preventive. And I think these community health advocate can be that conduit for that preventive mode to, because we see and hear and everything in our own community when it comes to health. For an example, we are experiencing a lot of violence in our community with gunshot wounds. How many community people are prepared to how to handle a gunshot wound, for an example? When it comes to drugs in our community, how many people know how to actually use the medicine that can bring people back to life? I forgot the name of it. We don't have those type of training. So those little things, and when it become that emergency response, then how many people know how to do CPR, for an example, in the community? So I think that's the relationship that needs to be developed between the health industry and communities to respond to a situation and to train us not only just in general medical response, but also look for environmental stuff. What is we associated in the community? I think that we all need to know what type of industry is in our community, what kind of chemicals that they use, and what is the emergency response to those chemicals unless they leak, spill, or explode. We don't have that. We have to wait on our fire department to provide that information for us. But we as communities, we have a right to know about what type of industry that is operating in our community, but we don't have that apparatus in our community, for lack of a better word. And that's why we just purchased of a school building that was going to be demolished. And we're going to name it the Hazel M. Johnson Institute for Sustainability and Environmental Justice. And these are some of the things that this is something that we're looking at to have in the institute for your assets, for the community assets, instead of, helping them to be able to create those, know what you have in your what you've been exposed to in your neighborhood, and to learn and to help clean up. One of the things, we know how to dirty up America, but we don't have that remediation workforce to clean it up. So let's talk about all these things, because at the end of the day, we all have to live in these neighborhoods. And if it's dirty, let's clean it up.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I loved everything you said. It was great, beautifully said. We have a little less than 10 minutes left, so I'm gonna try to get through a few more of our Q&A, and then I know our students have a few more questions. So I'm gonna start off with one of our first questions that was asked through the Q&A feature, which asks, would the extension of the red line help bring more attention to environmental concerns of far Southside residents? So just really quickly for folks who may not know, so right now the furthest red line stop goes up to 95th and Dan Ryan, but there's been an extension project proposed that it would go, I want to say go up all the way through 130th. So it would go through like the East Side, Hegwish, and then I want to say all the way into Alkin Gardens.
Yes, it's
Um,
going to be it's
yeah,
going to be located in Allgale Gardens. Well, we've been having those discussions. We've been putting in common input into that whole process. We want to be able to make sure that this development minimize any exposure to any air, water, and soil contamination. We're constantly talking about, the island of bus, or using electric bus for the red line extension. So there is conversation around that, and we're still and there's our commitments from Chicago Transit Authority to minimize as much of pollutants as possible in this development. Because we are the transportation desert area. We only got one bus, and it takes us 40 minutes to get from 130th to 95th Street. So, but it opened up other transit opportunities from let's say from Halsted to Torrance. There's not a direct bus that would take you from Halsted to Torrance, but this can create that avenue, because I tell everybody that even though All Gales is like on 130th and Ellis, Ford Motor Companies is on 130th Torrance. But in order for me to get to Ford for a job, for an example, it would almost take me three buses. It would take me three buses to get there, and then still have to walk. So it increased the opportunity for us to, in this area, to create an economic development in this area around, like a commercial strip mall, for an example. So we have to measure, but we are intelligent enough, and we got more technology today to minimize the pollution that is going to be created by the industry. And just having university, I think UIC is studying the red line extension. So there's some monitoring that going on that can inform us as community, or to monitor CTA what should be implemented. So we got more resource tools to make sure that we minimize the exposure as much as possible from this development.
great. Thank you for that.
I know
Okay.
I give long answers,
No,
y'all.
but they're good.
But
They're
this my passion in this stuff, so I
no.
like having these
No, and
discussions.
it's great,
So,
and yeah, I have a million things I want to say, but I'm just facilitating the Q and A. So
okay.
we're gonna try to squeeze in like 2 to 3 more questions in our last few minutes. But no, your responses are great, and I grew up in that area too, so everything you're saying I resonate with heavily. But I'm actually gonna pass it back over to Jocelyn to ask her second question, and then we're gonna try to squeeze in what we can before 3 o'clock.
So my second question was PCR not only focuses on environmental justice, but access to fair housing as well. How are these two issues interconnected, and how do we see them show up in our daily lives?
Well, that was when I've been with PCR since its inception. As I started off as a volunteer in the beginning, and then I was an assistant to the executive director. To now I became a project manager. But what I would say, what was the question again? I see, I just went off. It was.
No worries. It was so PCR not only focuses on environmental
Oh,
justice,
with
but
the
access to
housing,
fair
yeah, with the
housing.
house. I was a housing advocate from when I came in as a volunteer. And PCR was founded on the principle of the housing problem we was experiencing here in Argyle Gardens. Lead-based paints, asbestos, leaky sinks and stuff like that. So that's where we started our environmental action from those things. We forced Chicago Housing Authority to come up with some lead reforms, and where they created these lead reforms, but they also used to have an environmental office. But they disbanded that after 10 years of operation. And now they just been sued for like $60 million from a kid being poisoned, two families being poisoned by lead in their houses. But I say that environmental justice is interconnected to everything we do in life. This is what this how I tell people, imagine this an umbrella. Environmental justice is the cover, but the spokes is housing, the spokes is transportation, the spokes is education, training, employment, whatever. Let's say those spokes. If one of those spokes are broken in an umbrella, will that umbrella operate properly? No. So all these spokes need to be healthy in order to have a healthy environment. In order to have a sturdy umbrella, these spokes cannot be broken. But right now, these spokes are broken. And that's why we have an unhealthy environment.
Thank you so much for that, Cheryl. I was feeling a little ambitious with trying to squeeze in 2 to 3 more questions before three. We're already at 2:59, so we want to be respectful of everyone's time. But I just again want to thank you for being here with us, sharing so much of your knowledge, literally decades worth of knowledge, not only your own, but like what you carry on from your mother as well. But we also wanted to say, if you wanted to leave anything in this last like 30 seconds, if you wanted to leave anything with our audiences, um, this is kind of the time. Also, no pressure
Yeah,
though.
if you want to affect change in our society, you have to have passion for it. And if you want to protect, we have to have passion for it. And don't be afraid to start something new, because we wasn't afraid. We didn't know what the hell we was, excuse me for curse, but we didn't know what the hell we was doing. You know what I mean? But we just knew something wasn't right, and we was trying to make it right. We know that our air should not been polluted like that. We know that our water should not be polluted like that. So we didn't know directions, but as my mother said, closed mouth don't get fed. So we always kept our mouth open about something wrong with this. So whatever your passion, and you create that passion to affect change in it, and don't let nobody deter you from it, from whatever you want to do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let's do one last virtual round of applause for Shay.